You're nothing but a burden. Mama, the movers will be here in an hour. Those were the first words my daughter spoke before, calmly taking the house keys from my hand. For a moment, I honestly believed she was joking. Then she slipped my keys into her purse, folded her arms, and looked at me as though I were a stranger standing in her doorway instead of the woman who had raised her. I slowly looked around the living room, where my late husband and I had spent 42 years building our life together. His old recliner still sat beside the window. Family photographs covered the walls, and the ceiling fan clicked overhead just as it always had. Everything looked exactly the same. Only Rebecca had changed. I've already signed the paperwork, she said quietly. This house isn't yours anymore. I didn't ask what paperwork. I've seen enough in my life to know that people often reveal more than they intend when they believe they've already won. Outside, fresh-cut grass drifted through the open screen door while cicadas buzzed in the warm Tennessee afternoon. Across the street, old Mr. Dawson slowed his lawn mower and stared toward our porch without saying a word. Folks notice more than people think. Rebecca carried my suitcase to the front steps. I've arranged everything, she said. You'll be staying somewhere else. Somewhere else. She never even told me where. I reached for the worn brown handbag resting on the kitchen chair. She watched every move I made, but not because she cared where I was going. Her eyes stayed fixed on that old handbag. During the past week, she'd searched filing cabinets, desk drawers, closets, and every box in the attic. She never once asked about the handbag I carried everywhere. That was her first mistake. Her second was believing I would argue. Instead, I thanked her for bringing out my suitcase. The words caught her completely off guard. For the first time that morning, uncertainty crossed her face. People expecting a fight rarely know what to do with silence. Just then, a white moving truck turned onto our quiet street. Rebecca smiled, convinced it had come from my belongings. I watched it pull closer, remembering the phone call that had woken me before sunrise. The caller never gave a name. He said only 7 words before hanging up. Mrs. Carter, don't let your daughter sign today. The moving truck rolled to a stop in front of my house, but the driver never got out right away. He sat behind the wheel looking down at a clipboard while Rebecca checked her watch every few seconds. She looked nervous for the first time all morning, though she tried not to show it. I quietly wondered whether the mysterious caller had known. Something I didn't. The words kept echoing inside my mind. Don't let your daughter sign today. Sign what? Rebecca had already claimed the paperwork was finished. So why was someone warning me? I picked up my handbag and walked toward the sidewalk without another word. That's it? Rebecca called after me. You're just leaving? I turned around. You seem to have everything under control, I answered calmly. She frowned, almost disappointed that I wasn't arguing. People sometimes mistake silence for surrender. They couldn't be more wrong. I walked 2 blocks to the small diner where my friend Martha worked every Tuesday morning. She poured me a cup of coffee before asking a single question. One look at my face was enough. After listening quietly, she reached across the table and squeezed my hand. You need to call Frank, she said. Frank Lawson had been my husband's attorney for more than 20 years. Earl trusted him with every important document he ever signed. I hadn't spoken to Frank since my husband's funeral, but something told me today was different. I stepped outside and made the call. He answered on the second ring. Before I could explain, he interrupted me. Mrs. Carter, where are you? At Millie's diner. There was a long pause. Stay there. Don't go back to your house. I'll be there in 15 minutes. His voice was steady, but something underneath it sounded urgent. Exactly 18 minutes later, an old blue pickup pulled into the parking lot. Frank stepped out carrying a weathered leather briefcase. I recognized immediately. Earl had joked for years that the case was older than both of them combined. Frank slid into the booth across from me without ordering coffee. He opened the briefcase, removed a thick sealed envelope with my husband's handwriting across the front, and placed it on the table between us. Then he looked me straight in the eyes and quietly said, Your husband asked me never to open this unless Rebecca tried to take your home. For several seconds, I couldn't bring myself to touch the envelope. My husband's handwriting was as familiar to me as my own. Seeing his name again, months after we had buried him, made the diner around me seem strangely quiet. Frank waited without saying a word. Finally, I slid one finger beneath the seal and carefully opened it. Inside were several folded documents and a handwritten letter. Frank nodded toward the letter. Read that first. I unfolded the pages slowly. Earl's neat handwriting filled every line. "My dearest Grace," it began. "If you're reading this, something has happened that I prayed never would. I hope I'm wrong. But if Rebecca ever pressures you to leave our home or asks you to sign papers you don't fully understand, stop immediately and trust Frank." My hands began to tremble. Earl went on to explain that during his illness, he had noticed Rebecca asking unusual questions about the house, the bank accounts, and the deed. She had never asked those questions before. At first, he believed she was simply worried about our future. Then he discovered she had quietly met with a real estate agent without telling either of us. That was when he decided to protect the home we had spent our lives paying for. Earl wrote that every legal step had been completed months before his passing, and every document had been reviewed by Frank. "She can't sell your home," Frank said gently after I finished reading. "Not unless the law is ignored." He handed me another document from the envelope. It wasn't the deed to the house. It was something much thicker. Every page carried official county stamps and notarized signatures. Frank pointed to one paragraph. "Your husband created legal protections that cannot simply disappear because someone says they own the property." I felt a small measure of relief. For the first time all day, Rebecca had sounded so certain that morning. She had acted like everything was already finished. Yet Earl had clearly expected something like this long before he died. Then why would she tell me the house was hers? I asked quietly. Frank didn't answer immediately. Instead, he reached into his briefcase once more and removed a certified copy of a document that had been filed at the county recorder's office only yesterday afternoon. When I saw the signature at the bottom, my heart nearly stopped. It was my name, but I had never signed it. I stared at the signature until the letters began to blur. It looked enough like my handwriting to fool a stranger, but not someone who had signed her own name for nearly 70 years. "I never signed this," I said. Frank gave a slow nod. "I know you didn't." He placed my driver's license beside the document, then another file containing signatures from my bank records, property tax forms, and voter registration. Even to my untrained eye, the differences became obvious. Whoever forged my name had copied the shape of my signature but missed the little habits that come from years of writing. It the same way. Frank picked up his phone and called the county recorder's office. Less than an hour later, we were sitting across from the chief deputy recorder inside a quiet office that smelled of old paper and furniture polish. She carefully examined every document before opening a computer file. "Mrs. Carter," she said, "this deed was recorded yesterday at 3:14 in the afternoon." I didn't even have to think. Yesterday at 3? I was serving lunch at Fellowship Baptist Church. The deputy looked up. "Can anyone verify that?" "About 40 people can," I answered. Frank smiled for the first time that day, including the pastor. The deputy immediately wrote down his name. She then enlarged the scanned deed on her computer screen. "There's something else," she said softly. She pointed to the notary seal. "This commission expired almost 8 months ago." Frank leaned closer without saying a word. The deputy continued scrolling through the electronic record until another document appeared. My stomach tightened. Attached to the deed was a sworn affidavit claiming I had voluntarily moved out because I could no longer manage my own affairs. Every statement was false. My signature had been forged again. "Who filed these?" I asked. The deputy turned the monitor toward us. The filing receipt clearly listed the person who had delivered the paperwork to the courthouse the previous afternoon. My chest felt heavy before I even looked. Then I read the name. It wasn't Rebecca. It belonged to someone I had trusted almost as much as family for more than 20 years. Frank slowly removed his glasses and whispered, "Well, I certainly didn't expect that." Suddenly, everything we thought we understood about Rebecca's plan changed. She hadn't been working alone, and the person standing beside her knew every legal shortcut in the county. The name on the filing receipt belonged to Carl Whitmore, a local real estate broker who had handled several property sales for families in our county over the years. I knew him from church dinners and community events. Earl had always been polite to him, but he never hired him. Frank's expression hardened. If Carl knowingly filed forged documents, this is no longer just a family dispute. The deputy recorder immediately contacted the county investigator, who arrived within the hour. He collected the forged deed, the false affidavit, the expired notary information, and every supporting record. Then he visited Fellowship Baptist Church, where the pastor and dozens of volunteers confirmed I had been serving lunch at the exact time the documents claimed I was signing papers. Across the county. Security footage from the church fellowship hall placed me there beyond any doubt. Bank records also showed that no mortgage payments, taxes, or household expenses had ever come from Rebecca's accounts. Everything had been paid from mine. Faced with the evidence, Carl admitted Rebecca had told him. I wanted to transfer the property quickly, because my health was failing. He claimed he never questioned the signatures, but the investigation proved he had ignored obvious irregularities. The court canceled every fraudulent filing, rejected the attempted loan against my home, and confirmed that Earl's estate plan remained fully valid. Rebecca wasn't punished because I sought revenge. She faced the consequences of her own decisions. Friends stopped believing her excuses. Family members who had once defended her quietly stepped away after seeing the court records. Carl lost his professional license for violating his legal responsibilities. A week later, I unlocked my own front door with the same key I had carried for years. The porch swing Earl built still creaked in the evening breeze. The old coffee maker hummed in the kitchen. I poured a glass of sweet tea and sat, watching the sun disappear beyond the oak trees. Rebecca called once, asking if we could talk. I told her I hoped she would rebuild her life honestly, but trust had to be earned one truthful step at a time. I hung up without anger because anger wasn't what carried me through. Patience did. Truth did. Earl once told me that a house is built with lumber, but a home is built with character. Sitting on that porch, I finally understood exactly what he meant.